Well, thank you everyone for your patience. We are now out of executive session. We'll move on to point number 2, approval of the minutes of the last meeting and the agenda for this meeting with those amendments that I made at the beginning. Are there any objections to approval of the minutes or agenda? Hearing none, the minutes of the previous meeting are approved. We will move into updates and discussion, and I think updates from city manager and law director, but I think we can do those as one here in this conversation. So I think that you know, we need to talk about the timeline we're on. We need to talk about what our current list of issues is and potential avenues to solve those things. So, you know, today's the 100th day of the year. 2025 has gone by pretty quick. We're about 3.5 weeks away from the May primary, and then 265 days to the charter being sunset. So I just think that perspective is helpful as we're thinking about these things. So on the agenda, I put just a couple of the issues I've been thinking about. You know, obviously the December problem, which, you know, Ann and Neil, I know that you two were not here for our last meeting when that was discussed. And for the benefit of folks listening who might not be aware, that is that the current offices elected under the charter, so auditor, treasurer, and the council. Those terms end at the end of November, and issue 23 states that the new statutory elected officials, those offices don't begin until the first of the year. So we'll have a month period, essentially without a city government, a city elected government, that is. Number 2 on that is harmonizing city operations, just conforming the charter city structure to the structure that's set forth in the Ohio Revised Code. And that's the operations of the administration of the city, and I put in another one below that, harmonizing our municipal officers, you know, our auditor, our treasurer, our council, to be more in line with the way that the ORC says those must be. You know, I've said it that we have folks with jobs with the same names, but different roles and different responsibilities under the charter and under statute. So, yeah, that's not an exhaustive list, but I would like to talk about those things, and then also at the same time, once we kind of list those out here, talk about what some of our potential courses of action might be. You know, we've talked about special election. I think if we're going to do that, we should talk what's going to be part of that issue. You know, if that issue or if that election is permitted to move forward, if the DOE is going to let us do that, as well as what other avenues there might be, whether through ordinance that the current council might be able to pass, or that the next council might be able to adopt. So I'll open the floor to folks to discuss if they'd like to, if they have any thoughts, any ideas, or anything I'm missing, because I'm sure that I am.
Well, I know we had talked early on about the multiple positions and what the government would look like in the future. And I think we had asked the Finance Committee of Council to give budget projections to look at where the money would come from, hypothetically, where the money would come to pay for the additional fees. I don't know if we've had any report back from council on that.
I know I've had some discussion with the city auditor. I think he's still working on it, is my understanding.
Because and I saw the email that you sent earlier today regarding those kind of things with taxes and the ordinances for that. Because I think you know, the question would be, if that would not pass, if it goes to vote, what happens next? So where do the cards fall after that?
That's a good question. I wish I had a definitive answer right here on the spot. I think it's going to be a case by case. Like, I think the best answer, for example, going off the income tax, is just next year, and better. It does. it shouldn't matter whether it's the primary or the November election, but the safe thing would be to have at the primary a reauthorization vote for the entire income tax ordinance. Now, the question is, what if the voters turn it down?
Because essentially we will have a year to
Right.
go through that
Right,
to figure it out, but
right.
another unknown, basically.
Right.
Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, it's just for us to be
You know, obviously-
mindful of.
Obviously, any ballot measure, the voters right to express their vote. And sometimes votes go the way I think they should, sometimes they don't go the way that I think that they should, but it's the voters who get to decide. So it's always kind of tough to predict sometimes
Right.
too.
And do we know, is it something that the auditor could work on to say if that would not pass, looking at where the numbers would, like maybe
Yeah.
two options, option A
Yeah.
is it passes, option B it doesn't, and here's
Right,
what we have to do based on the new form of government with
Right.
additional positions.
yeah. No. I can follow up with
Yeah.
the auditor on that.
And that's something that's been difficult too is, and I think this is where I've kind of landed on this, is the question of issue 4 on the May primary. You know, that, well, we don't want to put too much in before that happens. We don't want to make a plan in case we need to pivot quickly if that measure is approved by the voters. But with that said, issue 23 is the law of the land now. Our existence, this commission's existence is owed to issue 23. And, we have to continue planning on implementing that, for right now, regardless of that outcome. Obviously, if issue 4 is adopted, we'll have to reassess then. But, I think that our plan should be as if the May election does not exist, is not happening. I want to focus a little bit of time on this December problem, on the December issue. I think that maybe working backwards on this question might be the way to solve it. My problem is how do we, the problem is how do we fill those roles and how we make sure that all those exigencies are covered like we discussed in the last meeting, but how do we provide for that? Is that something that the current legislative authority, the city of Nelsonville, has authority to, appoint folks to do that? Is it to create some sort of temporary legislative authority? Is that something that we need to have come from the voters, or is that something that we might be able to have come from the state? I don't have the answers to those things, but those are just, what do we do to create that transitional government for the month of December?
Probably the least risky would be if there's even just one person running for a December 1-month term on the November ballot, so they'll be appearing on the same ballot as everybody else. But we'd have to make sure with the Board of Elections, they clearly specify this is someone running for a 1-month term. If there's one person on council, that one person could make a series, that one person would appoint a second person, and then the two of them would appoint a third person, and appoint a fourth person. All of them would only be there, obviously, for the 1 month, but as long as we have 4, there's a quorum. Well, actually, we're gonna need 5, because anything that will be done in December will have to be done on an emergency basis, so there will need to be 5. As long as there's one person, like I like to say, the peg doesn't have to be big, but we need something to hang the hat on, even if it's a small.
And hopefully it's not needed.
Correct.
That's ideal, is that peg is not needed, but it needs to be there.
Right. Because, and again, there, the safety, remember, would be, hey, that one person at least would be elected by the voters.
know how you can explain this to the people.
It makes my head hurt thinking about it.
They just, I mean, it's a concept that is very difficult to
Well,
learn.
and there will be some
Preference.
people, with all due respect, there will be some people who will see the person running for the December 1 month term and think there's some funny business going on.
Is there any way to put on, if we do a special election or even a primary, just to put something out there extending the current council for 1 month only?
Yeah,
Is that possible? And then it just makes it one
that'd be a
vote.
charter amendment, right?
That would be a charter amendment. My concern is if there's a charter amendment, even if it doesn't say so, I think a charter amendment automatically, as a matter of law, repeals issue 23.
That's gonna make everybody mad.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
we can't do that.
Can you explain that?
sure.
Why that is
So-
the case?
So remember that the charter's on its deathbed.
Yes.
It's not dead, it's alive, but it's on its deathbed. We know what its date of death is going to be.
Yeah.
Our job is basically just make the charter comfortable as it, glides. Right, as it passes. The problem is, we're still in the, what if a medical miracle happens and it's resuscitated? It's alive. And it's alive past that date of death.
Why?
So,
What, I think I'm just confused as why an amendment to the charter now supersedes issue 23.
So the general rule in legal construction is when you have, so remember, there's a hierarchy of authority, like there's the US Constitution, the Ohio Constitution, Nelsonville City Charter, Nelsonville ordinances. When Nelsonville ordinance conflicts with any law above it, the higher law controls. So if there's a Nelsonville ordinance that says no free speech rights, that's not a valid law because that conflicts with the both the Ohio Constitution and the US Constitution. The question is, what happens when you have laws of equal level that conflict with each other? And the rule there is you apply the rule that's most recently adopted. So for example, if there's two ordinances, both dealing with the speed limit on Canal Street, one says it's 55, one says it's 35, you ask, well, which one was the most recently passed ordinance? That's the one that controls in that conflict. So the problem here is when we're dealing with, the question, is the charter dead or alive? You go with the most recently. I'm not saying this is 100% sure. I'm maybe 75, 80% confident in this answer, because again, we're in uncharted territories, but the ordinary legal rule is when you have two laws of equal authority, you go with the most recent one.
So even if we don't say in a charter amendment, if we don't mention anything about the sunset, we don't mention anything about issue 23, we just say the current council's terms will expire at the end of December, or any term, not just the current council, any term expires at the end of December rather than the end of November.
Right.
You're still concerned that?
I'm concerned about, and again, I might be wrong.
Yeah.
Like this is,
I don't see the difference really between that and voting somebody in for a month, I guess.
Well, this is going to get complicated because I'm just kind of thinking out loud, and my wife tells me that's not a good habit for me to have, but one option would be in November, have exactly the same language of issue 23, just have another vote on issue 23, add in all council terms, just go through the end of December, and then number 2, council has full authority to implement the transition. That will accomplish, I think, the same goal as issue 23. That won't solve all of our problems, but that will logistically solve 90 to 95%. But again, that's all contingent on.
And we're waiting until November for that.
Yes.
So then we're kind of
Right.
in a spot if we get to November, it doesn't pass.
Right. I would imagine the voters would be banging on City Hall door going,
We don't want that.
what's happening? Again, just to be clear, I could be wrong about kind of a silent repeal of issue 23. Again, because the state's never done this before, that question's never been brought up, but I'm just trying to analogize to the normal legal question. That's why I'm saying what I'm saying, but again, I could definitely see a court going the other way, just basically saying, this is its own unique situation. We're not going to apply the ordinary legal rule. But then again, courts like to apply the same.
Let me ask you a hypothetical. So hypothetically, we extend city council through December. Somebody files a grievance on it and we go to court. That won't be settled in December,
No.
which would buy us the time to get through.
Right, and then the new council could kind of sort.
So in theory, it could work.
It could.
And then in January, February, it'd be a moot point.
Yeah.
Because you've already got the new thing going.
Right, and then the new statutory council would still have full authorities and powers to, you know, if their view is something that happened in December was wrongful, well, it's just 1 month of wrongful, and then the new council can take whatever they deem to be the corrective action.
We keep the lights on.
Hypothetically. Okay, so what Neil was talking about, if we, just do this like road, I guess, or, well, go back to like the least risky is doing one person, okay? And say we decide to extend, okay? And then there's a possibility of there being a lawsuit against the city. I think we need to consider if that would happen, how risky is that as far as how much it may be costing the city to do that? I think that has to be taken into
But
consideration.
I don't see the difference between voting one person on and then appointing and voting to extend the current council, because it's still a vote under the charter. They're both fall.
Provided for.
They're both fall in the current government.
So,
Neither one of them would reflect the future government.
Correct. But it could ignite a lawsuit.
Well, so either one of them could, because they both fall under the same statute.
What if-
I think, could you explain that more? Because you said you thought the one would be least risky.
Well,
If I may, the first option, just so we're keeping everything clear here, the first option is just have board of elections put someone, or if we can get someone to run for the charter council seat on this November ballot. They would just serve that one term. But what you're saying is that we wouldn't have to amend the charter for that because the new offices take place on the first. I think that would just,
Then the other way we would have to.
the other way would have to amend. The second option where we'd have to establish or extend those terms, that'd be an amendment to the charter. So first option, no amendment to the charter, but probably equally confusing, maybe just as legally fraught. And then the second option would be an amendment to the charter. My thought is if we do propose an amendment to the charter, what if we just mirror issue 23 in it and, and just be sure that the language is still in there and that this most recent update to the charter says the charter sunsets, December 31st.
yeah, so if that's, well,
Because that's what they voted.
Yeah, and we would have to explain that to them, that we just need 1 month
Yeah.
to keep us afloat.
And I think that the way to message that would be, calling that a transitional amendment, maybe we add the 13th section to the charter that is just, sunset, transition away from charter government.
And
this would be under option 2.
Yeah, to be.
the only thing I like about that is it has the current council in it and everybody's up to speed on what's been going on versus you get somebody who hasn't taken part in any of this and then everybody, the whole town's relying on one person.
And the other
To get
problem
us
would be
through.
with one person then having to go through the process of getting 4 other people is time consuming. Yeah, I mean, it creates more problems, I think, than.
Imagine trying to float us for a month and have no clue what's going on.
And also, there's the question about whether or not current council is gonna be able to get a budget done before,
that time.
Well,
before the end of November.
also keep in mind, there's a possibility that the current council members may not want to vote to extend their own terms and just decide to take an early retirement.
We can pray.
30 days. That's
Yeah.
nothing.
No.
I mean, I think whatever way we decide to go here, I think messaging is gonna be, I mean, I think this is confusing. It's confusing for us. It's gonna be confusing for our members. So I think messaging, no one needs to be, have to make a decision that gotta be priority on how we, get this information to the voters.
In a way that they can read it and not just, we think they've read it. That meeting that is the League of Women Voters is having the end of April.
We can do a Q&A.
Yeah, I think,
We could do a town hall Q&A on whatever option we decide on that we want to put on the ballot. We can flood Facebook, the internet, the city's
Radio
webpage,
station.
radio station, and then we can bring everybody in here and do a Q&A. They can answer questions, we can answer them to the best of our ability before they vote on them.
absolutely, a town hall is, or 2 or 3 is definitely
We have to do that.
is going to happen. I just want to be sure that we know the path forward before that happens. We need to be able to communicate clearly why we're having that meeting. That meeting needs to be on our terms of, we're calling that because we have something to share.
My question was, could we have that part of that other meeting on the 27th of April? Is that too soon?
I think that would be too soon
Okay.
because this is one place where I would like to keep in mind of the May primary,
Okay,
because I don't want to get a word out that we're doing this, issue 4 is adopted, and then we're back kind of in the desert of what we're doing here.
And I think that voters don't pay attention until, so we wouldn't want to do anything if this is the case until after, like September or something like that, for the November election. Because people don't think that far in advance about voting, really.
at least we've explored the choices.
Yeah, I mean, is there anything we're missing here? Any other options to either change the law or fill those council seats for the month of December? I mean, it might be redundant to ask, but I do think we just need to look in every closet here, I think.
I think, if one recommendation could be that council adopts a resolution just to make sure that the Board of Elections is opening the 1-month term. I know, and this is just kind of from folks around the county in recent years, I've heard people who are frustrated with the Board of Elections in terms of not giving them petitions when they believe that they should be giving them and so forth. Now, I'm not trying to fault the Board of Elections. It's just, they have to be
That's
careful.
their perception.
That's their interpretation of the law.
Right.
That's the advice of their counsel.
And also, they have been very careful, increasingly careful over recent years, not to do anything that seems to be giving legal advice, because it's, even when they are trying to be helpful, it has resulted in lawsuits against them.
Yeah.
So they are very reticent to give people assistance, but then that's frustrating to the people, the potential candidates. If there's a resolution from council, just clarifying that, I think that might be helpful to the Board of Elections.
Okay, and remind me, Jonathan, when is the deadline for independent candidates to get on that November ballot? Because that would be an independent office.
Under the charter, it will be August.
Okay.
Under the statutory form, it will be May 5th.
Okay.
So that's another confusion.
Well, which do we pick?
Well, these would be in our charter, so
Yes.
that would be in August for folks to get their petitions, get their signatures and get on that ballot for those 1-month terms. So what's the latest that resolution can come from council to?
Well, we want to give people at least I would think 2 months to circulate petitions.
Okay.
So what would that would push us to early June, so it would be either this month or May that we want that resolution adopted.
Okay, I like that idea. I don't know if I feel confident making a recommendation on that tonight. That just might be my kind of conservative nature, but interested to hear other thoughts on making sure those 1 month offices will be on the ballot. I'm not convinced that that's the best course of action at this time.
I have a question, maybe I could ask Greg,
Go ahead.
or all of you. Would this be something we could float out on Monday night's meeting? So that they could at least have an idea of what we're thinking about when you make your presentation, and you can say, this is what we're thinking.
If the commission would like for me to share that with council, I'd be more than happy
Do
to
you
say
think,
that it was an option.
Greg, it might be okay?
I'll allow you to make that decision.
Okay,
If the commission thinks that it is appropriate for me to make that comment to council, not saying that we're recommending this at this time.
But these are the two options we came up
Yes.
with, they're the options that we came up with.
Okay,
And as long as we can explain to them why we're in this predicament, why we have to come up with that.
I think they want explanations.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, good idea.
I think that section of the December problem is probably topped out for now. I do want to make sure that we know the sub-problems on that. So if we decide to, obviously option one, there aren't as many issues with the December problem there. That we just have new folks in those offices for 1 month, those offices are filled, by the letter of the law, we're clear, operationally. But Mr. Summers and Mr. Coons, you said that could cause some problems just because of inexperience. Option two, that covers the council, that covers the treasurer, if Mr. Mullane is willing to continue serving in that role. And obviously the auditor's office is still up in the air. Mr. Sappington, it's the end of September, beginning of September,
Beginning or it's towards the end of that.
Okay. And end of September, he is becoming the county treasurer, and we will have a vacancy in our auditor's office here. I don't know if that is our problem to think about now, but if we're going to go down that path of option two, we'll have to think about that.
Under the current charter, are they allowed to temporarily appoint a treasurer?
So when there's a vacancy in the treasurer or auditor, the city manager appoints subject to approval by council.
So it's possible for that appointment to go through December. Correct. So we might be able to just take care of that in one swoop. Right.
That's easier.
Yeah.
So that
I mean,
Provided the auditor will be easier, since it'll happen in September, but if there's no treasurer in November, or I'm sorry, in December, and no council in December, you can't really appoint anyone and make them approve.
Yeah.
If there's no council.
which is a problem because the treasurer is the bank account of the city. So keep that in mind.
Option two is settle that.
it would, yeah. And yeah, it would.
Is that something that, Devin, you could talk with Michael to see if he would be willing to go that route?
That would be a gift.
what else are we missing, other pitfalls that could occur? Thinking December 1, we don't have auditor, treasurer, council. Obviously, we've answered that we have two options, fill those. Are there other, to fill all those offices? Are there other problems that could come up because of those terms ending? Just putting it out there, there might not be, but just wanting to be sure we're covering our bases.
With the luck we've been having, there will just something appear.
In theory, option one, we get 5 people voted in. They can do December 1st, an emergency meeting, and appoint somebody for 30 days, right? Because that goes through the city manager, through council, and then they could appoint somebody for the remaining 30 days in December. Into those positions, correct?
For auditor and treasurer.
Yes. But that would all have to take place December 1.
Probably at midnight, yeah.
I guess one thing too, well, if no one runs for treasurer and Mr. Mullane doesn't want to do it for the last month.
Call him right now.
Yeah, well, he could always resign 12 hours early. Council could have a midnight meeting, appointing and affirm.
Oh, okay.
Well, if you're appointing him early, would you just be appointing him to the unexpired term?
Correct. Well,
An expired
Yeah,
term,
you're right,
so you don't
you're
have to be
right.
appointing him
You're
for
right,
12
sorry.
12 hours.
yeah, that would, sorry.
You
forget
can't
about what I
future
said.
appoint.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So it's almost like we should really wait for this conversation down the road to see if there is a auditor candidate who wants to be appointed for that time period. I mean, because we just don't know.
Well,
that's the-
so in the new form of government, that would be a higher position.
No, the treasurer will still be elected, but the vacancy will be, the mayor can appoint a temporary acting treasurer.
So whoever in theory, we appoint somebody in December, we could just reappoint them January 1st, temporary until we get an elected.
Yeah.
Which, that is something I've been thinking about too, Jonathan, is because the ORC appointment of vacancies is partisan. What do you do if there's nobody if no party has held
Yes.
that office previous?
I think,
Would it go back to 94, and whatever party held that office then?
I think the best answer is you default to the statutory provision that treat it as an independent role, which will default to the way villages fill vacancies, which is council fills them. And if council doesn't act in 30 days, then the mayor does. So that would be for council vacancies. For treasurer, law director vacancies, those are temporary acting appointed by the mayor. I believe the same thing would be true of the city auditor, but I need to double check that specifically, but I know for law director, and treasurer, those are appointed. Interestingly enough, for the law director appointment as a temporary, in that situation, the law director doesn't have to be a resident, as long as there's no one eligible to be in that role. That therefore does give the city some flexibility on that position, but again, it's going to come down to who is actually available. And since I promised council that I wouldn't be available, I can't make that.
Yes. So no residents run for law director, but then they go to appoint someone, and there's two people are interested. One's a resident, one's a non-resident. You have to give it to the resident.
That's a good question. I don't know if I'd have to do some research. I suspect that's never been litigated before.
My gut would probably say you have to go, you
That
should go with the rest.
that would be the safest, because the statute does specifically say
Yeah.
for that, it would have, if there's no one available, well, if there's someone available who's a resident, then that seems to kind of issue the.
Can we get what we and I'm just thinking out loud, like a flow chart of every position, and come up with a plan per position for December, and then after December, what we would recommend. And I think that'd be easy, just to
Yeah.
go
It would
through
be easy
title
for
by
people to
title.
see it too.
Yeah, and if we put that, this is why we have to do it, this
I think,
position has to be filled this way, this position has to be filled this way, or could be filled.
I've been working on separate flow charts, well, not really flow charts, but hierarchy charts for both, because trying to, still working on that
We
chart.
have this one.
Yeah.
On the table, yeah.
Yeah, and then if we just
So,
did that.
I've created one for the, charter form of government, so I can mesh the two and do kind of a flow
And
chart.
we can do, the whole December problem on one, how, by position, because there a couple of
Very
years.
good idea.
Because when we looked at the statutory chart that you gave us, some of them were question marks. And I don't know at what point we will know until that council is elected on what these positions will be. It's kind of after they're elected, they will decide who in this hierarchy will be funded.
Right, which is, just going back for a moment, if there is a November ballot measure, there needs to be something that says council has full authority to implement the,
Yeah, we'll have to be very careful writing that.
right, because if there, again, it doesn't have to be a very big hook, but as long as there's a hook, then provision can be made for, we can erase those question marks on the statutory form.
Yeah, that would have to, along with that, we have to include this amendment does sunset the charter.
Which I think would make a lot of the people feel good about that, because that was what they wanted.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Summers, your question of the flow chart and, making a plan each by each, you and I were talking about assigning roles to folks to kind of, break up the work a little bit. I think that could be an excellent opportunity once we have those documents ready. We can go and say, okay, Mr. Coons, you're gonna take a look at this. Mr. Summers, you're gonna take a look at this. Go down the line. And that's when we can, start eating the elephant one bite at a time, I think, is being able to break that work out, and each of us can become experts on that one specific role. And then that's when we can compile a report out of all of that work, and share that with council and share that with the public of this is the plan of how to address these issues. So looking at my agenda here, I feel like, under Division C, points 1 and 3 are talked out. Do we want to talk about number 2 on that, the harmonizing city operations, departments of public service, public safety, making sure that those are conformed to what's required in the ORC, as well as, commissions and other appointed, roles that are provided under both charter and the statute. I'm just gonna be honest, I do not have the expertise to speak on either of those right now. I know very high level. Obviously the directors of public service and public safety need to be hired, I think, by the first Monday in February. Under the Ohio Revised Code, those can be combined by council to make that hiring process a little bit easier. But anybody have any thoughts on that right now?
I have no idea.
Is it, Devin, you might be able to answer this. Is there are there organizational documents that the city has about this is who has these jobs, these are their responsibility? We don't need names on those, obviously, but just having, our,
Job titles and descriptions.
Job
Yeah.
descriptions, yeah.
is that something that you could prepare and have for us? Thank you. So I think both those for public service and public safety, would be helpful, because then we can take that into, take that up against those chapters in the revised code and deal with those. Well, unless anybody else has any discussion under, number 3C, I think we can move on. All right, so then we want to, go into point D there, which we touched on already, discussion of communications to the public, as well as what we want our recommendations and our report to council to look like, whether we want to do that as a single, omnibus type, here's a 100-page stack of paper, this is what we worked on, this is what you need to do. Or if we want to keep this kind of as what we've been doing, as the trickle as needed.
I can't imagine anybody wanting to read the 100-page paper.
I think, update when we can, and then we're obviously gonna have to have a 100-page document at some point, but I think we kind of explain as we go, it'll be beneficial.
That'll help us create the 100-page paper.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah,
And I think if we're giving these, stream of information out, and then if it gets to council or to committee, if they have questions, they can get back to us.
Yeah.
That way we can have more conversation that way, so that if there are concerns or ideas, that we could take
have to
them.
be a dialogue.
Yeah.
we could give them, or at least Greg, a copy of our minutes.
Well,
And then at least he'd be updated on what's been discussed at every meeting, even though he's sitting right there. And that could be one form of passing the information.
yeah, but the council clerk is the keeper of our minutes ultimately, so, council can also get those from
Yeah.
Ms. Harmony if they would like. Yeah, I think the pitfall we need to watch out for is making sure that all of that's in harmony, our updates and our week by week recommendations and whatever the final plan is. We just don't want those to conflict with one another.
And probably also we need to think about you, Devin, with any concern or questions employees may have too, with how things are progressing, and, what kind of communication we want to have with them about.
So, yeah, that's for the idea of like the town hall style.
Yeah.
Style thing is, would it be helpful for us or one of us to be able to, maybe be down here at working hours or, at the beginning of a shift, and be able to say, here's what we're working on, we want to hear questions from you guys. I think that's a great idea. We need to make sure we're taking care of our, our city employees and making sure they're aware of what's going on.
Could we throw together like a one-page bullet points? This is what we're focusing on, blah, blah, blah. What do you have questions on? And then they can, and if we can't answer that, we bring it here and discuss it and get back.
I think it's a great idea. What would the timeline for that be, you guys think? I am very hesitant to start putting things out, and to the public, and I know this meeting's public, but before we actually start going out and making, hard statements. I want to get past the May primary, I think.
I think.
Yeah,
I think that needs to be like
I agree.
August, September kind of timeframe. Again, it's like enough time before November, but that gives us to have our ducks in a row.
I do think that the city employees should probably come a little earlier than that.
We could do a monthly update for them after the May primary.
And another idea would be maybe as we're looking at the flow chart with the current positions and their job descriptions, maybe we need to have a separate meeting with those people for question and answer for us. Maybe the job description is one thing, but is that,
What they really do.
or is there more to this, or, maybe the job description doesn't fully describe the actual job functions.
We're hiring people, we want a solid.
Yeah.
job description.
It's like we're waiting for the May primary.
Well, that's definitely a switch. I mean, it's either go or no go.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Did you want me to wait?
Could we wait to public comment? Thank you, Abby. So I think that's kind of the one we just kind of, we can plan, you know, work on thoughts beforehand, but we do need to wait until after May to pull the trigger on anything. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to point 4 then, updates from the city manager and or water director.
Can we field Abby's questions, so she doesn't forget?
I'm not gonna forget it.
Oh, okay, well, you have a better memory than I do.
She writes it down.
No, I didn't. Actually, yes, I did. That's a lie.
Devin, did you want to go or did you want me to go?
You can do it.
Okay. Well, here I have some happy, news. So this is the letter, I received from the, League of Women Voters. They asked me to distribute it to the commission tonight. I think some of you probably are already aware that. You want a copy?
Yes.
I got 2 extra copies for. Thank you, buddy. Yes. So basically, they asked me to, distribute this, but this is basically them, setting up their timetable for doing their public, ward map proposal process. So, they established, they just reiterate their goals, open and transparent process, complete a ward map that complies with all applicable federal and state laws. That then can be presented to Nelsonville City Council, and they want to be able to demonstrate and document a process by which other municipalities in similar situations can draw or redraw lawful and fair voting districts. They reiterate in this document that they have sole control and direction over the creation of their proposal. In other words, council or the city is not influencing it, other than just the city just asking that they ensure it's an open and transparent process. They note, hey, the May 2025 ballot measure, if it was passed, would accelerate the time to adopt the ward map. So that's why on the next page, their timeline does, I think, kind of accelerate that, because if that May charter update passes, then council would have authority to adopt that map in July. If it doesn't pass, then the current council, I don't think, has the authority to adopt a ward map. It would have to be the January, the new statutory council, but it would just already be proposed. The proposal will be there, so January 1st, they can just take it off from the table and enact it. So anyway, I told Mr. Martin of the League of Women Voters how much the city appreciates their assistance, their kind assistance, and I told him I would pass this on to you just to, as an update. And I'm looking forward to seeing them on the 27th, although I do know that is the same date as I believe the Tunnels to Towers run earlier in the morning. So, hey, well, folks can stick around in Nelsonville for.
Like a run straight all over the wall.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah.
So that's my update on that point. The other update, actually, while we're talking about the May primary, the Ohio Constitution does require a charter amendment that the city circulate to the voters notice in advance. And that can be done in 2 different ways: mailing to every registered voter or publishing it in the newspaper. The city is doing both just to ensure full availability. So my understanding is on Saturday, the legal notice will be running in the Athens Messenger, and I believe it will be running for the next 3 weeks. 3 weeks, yes. And then I believe earlier today, I don't know if they were actually mailed out, but earlier today,
Later tomorrow.
the mailings will go out with the text to all of the registered voters. And again, you know, it's not taking in any position on it because it's the voters' decision, but that
It's just legally required notice.
correct. So there's that, the next item I have, I don't really know how to characterize this. But the city got a letter from the Secretary of State's office. The Secretary of State, it's evident the Secretary of State is looking into issue 23. And, well, let me just read their letter and then I can comment on it. Perhaps if I could put together something cogent. So this is dated March 19, 2025. Dear Nelsonville City Clerk. The Board of Elections has certified to the Secretary of State's office that the electors of your municipality approved an amendment to your charter at the election held on November 5, 2024. Article 18, Section 9 of the Ohio Constitution requires the municipality to certify a copy of all home rule charters and subsequent amendments to the Secretary of State within 30 days after adoption. Our office has not received a copy of the amendment. It is necessary that we have the exact text of the amendments as defined by ordinance. Ballot language is not sufficient to ensure our record on file is accurate. Also, please provide us with the month and year of the most recent version of the full charter so we may verify that the most current version of your charter is on file with the Secretary of State's office. Please provide our office with this information by April 25, 2025. And then it gives the contact information. Two initial thoughts. One, the Secretary of State is considering the Nelsonville Charter not to be dead and not to be on life support. They consider it to be in effect. And they consider issue 23 to be an amendment to the charter, indicating that they still, after what this letter literally means is after December 31st, they will still consider Nelsonville Charter to exist.
What the heck is that?
Well,
That's a concept.
so that's my second thought. I think the real reason they did this is they're confused about what I had heard several months ago that they were having a meeting about issue 23. I didn't know what about. I didn't ask. I was just told that by the Board of Elections. This is obviously the outcome of that meeting. I think they have no idea how to treat issue 23. This goes back actually to the legal issue involving that the litigation around issue 23, which remember was just about, do we follow the charter initiative procedures to put it in, or do we follow the constitutional charter amendment procedures to put it on the ballot? The court said it's under the charter initiative procedure. Secretary of State clearly disagrees with the courts. They can because they weren't added. They were at no point ever included in that lawsuit. That was a mistake. Of course, it was a mistake by the plaintiffs. They're not bound by those court orders.
Which
Because-
mayor are you speaking of?
Secretary of State.
Okay.
Yeah, the Secretary of State is not bound by those court orders. We can't even assume they're aware of them. I mean, likely they've looked into it, just given the paper trail. But they do not have any legal obligation to comply with those. Now, go ahead.
So I might just be, it's just me not being an attorney, but are they just doing what they are required to do until the 31st, until the end of the year, and then will they reassess that?
Well, so their role, so here's, I guess, what I've just said is maybe kind of making us more anxious. Let me kind of diffuse it a little bit. The Secretary of State doesn't have any authority to do anything. They're just
The record keepers.
They're just the record keepers. They're there to administer the elections, but they don't actually get to decide substantive questions of law. They're not the Attorney General. They're not the governor. They're not the state legislature. They're not the Supreme Court. Just like the Board of, I mean, it's an important role. The Board of Elections is an important role, but like, they don't get to decide. The Board of Elections doesn't actually get to decide legal questions. They just follow the law. They implement the law. One of their legal duties is to be the keeper of official documents such as municipal charters. the fact that they keep that is in of itself probably of minimal to no legal significance. However, here's where it becomes significant. So let's suppose, somebody next year who, let's say, is opposed to the statutory form of government, files a lawsuit challenging city action, saying, oh, the issue 23 wasn't lawfully passed. They could do that. I'm not saying that they would win. They could certainly file that lawsuit. What they would then do is say, oh, and we know the charter's still alive because guess what? The Secretary of State still has it on the books. That alone will cost the city $50,000 in litigation costs just to fight over that issue. And my guess is at the end of the day, the court would probably say, I don't care what the Secretary of State says. I'm going to figure out what the law says, and issue 23 is still in play, but it'll cost you $50,000 to figure that out. I think the second thing behind this letter is the Secretary of State is so their gut instinct is the same as mine, which I guess maybe means they're wrong. But their gut instinct is abolishing the chart, any changes to the charter, whether abolishing it or whatever, it needs to be done under the constitutional procedures. I think they sent this letter because what they're wanting is the city to say, oh, here's how we want you to treat issue 23. And then they'll just say, oh, well, whatever the city says, we'll go along with as their protection. The problem is we can't do that. I've already been in discussion with external counsel about this. We are concerned that anything other than just giving the ordinance to put the language on the ballot, anything more than that will be construed possibly as interfering with the implementation of issue 20. So the city is not going to do anything more than that, than the bare minimum, which won't get us anywhere, won't get the Secretary of State's office anywhere, but we can't run the risk of making it appear that the city's interfering. I don't know where that goes. It's completely out of our control. I have not talked to the Secretary of State's office. My understanding is the council clerk hasn't. I don't believe anyone in the city has talked to them. I'm sure the Board of Elections has because they regularly talk to the Secretary of State. But this, I guess at this point in time, it's just unclear where to go from it.
So then is this just for us to know? I mean, we're advisors.
It's just to know. I'm hoping next week to meet with the clerk just to make sure we get the right documents provided to the Secretary of State because we don't want to
Muddy the water.
We don't want to muddy the waters. Given that, I'm hoping that they'll take the hint that then they need to come back to the city with an explanation of what they're supposed to do, and then we can just go from there and it'll solve itself. That's my hope. But
How fast do you think that will occur?
well, if they had a meeting 2 months ago and then this letter comes now, well, so I'm not quite sure why it was dated March 19, but I only,
the view is the same day I got it.
right, so, which was a week ago. So, I don't know.
Under final paperwork and someone's desk.
Right, that's what I'm guessing. So if it's just kind of sitting on the low priority of the Secretary of State's office, well, I don't know what it. But again, just to kind of reassure us, they can't make substantive determinations. So we're not bound by anything that they say. If they're wrong, they're wrong. But if we tell them they're wrong, we better back it up because they'll sick the Attorney General on us.
So we should just allow them to be wrong and go with it. I'm not being facetious.
The city needs to comply with the law and constitution and state law.
I think if the clerk sends the documents, we've complied with the Secretary of State's request, and then just let it be their problem. If they think it's a problem, they'll need to come and tell us. And more importantly, they'll need to come and tell the other state agencies. And then I think the best thing is just to assume once we do that, it's solved. But I was not expecting to get this letter Let's see, was there? I believe that was my, I guess I had circulated the running list of ordinances for me to prepare, just to have done by the end of December for the new statutory council. So whatever suggestions that you have, just, there's no wrong answer for those, because remember, the new statutory council can make a decision about it. So just add whatever to that, and then I know what to work on.
And I think that there's two categories there too. There's the urgent things,
Police, fire,
police fire tax code. They were emailed later this afternoon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that there's two categories. There's the important ones and then the nice to have ones, what are some areas in the city that could be, the city operations and where we do things that through ordinance could be improved or made more efficient. Excellent. Anything else, Mr. Rube?
I don't have anything,
Any,
unless there are any questions.
so I was gonna say any more questions for Mr. Rube? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to, public comment.
My question was answered.
Great.
What? I was just wondering when the League of Women Voters were gonna have their meeting. Yeah, that wasn't.
You want a copy of this?
I have one. I will be asking for everything you sent to each other.
Yeah.
Today. And is there a copy of the agenda?
Yes, I have several floating around up here. Any more comments from the public?
Yeah, I just want to make council aware, after our meeting on the 14th, this coming Monday, we have, I believe it's 13 scheduled regular meetings left till the end of November. And per the charter, in July and August, council doesn't meet the second meeting of those 2 months. Now, that doesn't mean we can't call a special meeting, but those are the regular scheduled meetings to the end of November. So I just want to make the council, the commission aware of that.
Thank you, Mr. Clement. That is helpful for timeline and planning. Well, with no further comments, we'll move on to point 6 on our agenda, action to be taken. As you are aware, this is going to be Nick's last meeting as our secretary. So the executive session, we discussed potential replacements, and we have identified a candidate we would like to move forward with contacting and offering the role to. Do we need to make that set now, or can we just set it?
Do we need a motion for that, Jonathan?
That would probably be
And do we need to name that individual?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me pull up their resume so I get the name right. All right, I would entertain a motion to recommend Lydia Coakley to be offered position as secretary of this commission.
I'll make that a motion.
Second. Right, question is, should we forward forward Lydia J. Coakley forward to be named as secretary of this commission? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Coons,
Yes.
Mr. Summers,
Yes.
Ms. Addington,
Yes.
Ms. LaRue,
Yes.
Mr. Courtney,
Yes.
passes.
Thank you. So I have my, my marching orders for giving a report and update to the council on Monday. Is there any further action that needs to be taken in this meeting? Great.
I would just like to thank our reporter. I think she's done an excellent job.
She has.
And we are glad to know her and expect an equally good job for a certain council in this city.
Yeah, second to Ms. LaRue, thank you. With no further business for the commission, we will stand adjourned.
Are we gonna set our new?
I guess I'll count that as an objection to being adjourned.
Yes.
Yeah, we can go ahead and do that right now. I think that, does the bi-weekly arrangement still work for everyone, or you guys think that's sufficient? I guess this,
It was one of those historic things.
Yeah, the time, what works best for everyone.
That's enough.
And you had a meeting, John.
yeah, April 24th is 2 weeks from now. Yes, I think 6 PM kind of became the regular meeting for the regular time for this. Would that work for everyone? Great. Our next meeting will be on Thursday, April 24th at 6 PM.